Hello. Welcome to episode 51 of the Late Challenge podcast. We're 1 week away from our first full year. And with us still being in January, this week we decided to have a general chat about transfers, which I'm happy to admit I've robbed from the Stick to Football podcast last week. So I thought it'd be a good one for me and Robbo to talk about and give our thoughts on. But before we get stuck into all that, you might have noticed we're no longer in Jacob's crematorium, are we?
Yeah.
Robbo started his new job today, so we're now recording on Monday nights instead of Monday afternoon, and we had to find a new studio. So we'll talk more about life updates, including how Robbo's first day went in our Patreon show that's out on Friday. If you want to hear more of that, come and join us over there. It's only £1 a week to support this entire TLC thing, and you can try it out for 7 days for free to see if you like it. There's nearly 40. I think it's episode 39 of the Patreon show this week, isn't it? So nearly 40 episodes to work your way through. So it's an absolute bargain.
Audio and video as well. So, don't feel as though you've got to watch it. You can listen to it. You can have it on in the car.
You can listen to our dulcet tones while you're doing all kinds of shit in your life. And it was sad to leave the old studio, wasn't it? After just under a year. But exciting to get going with Jim and Dave in the new place. And there's heat.
It is.
Get on to that.
There is heat.
Dave literally just said to me before we started recording, let us know if you need us to turn the heat down. I was like, fucking hell. Feels spoiled already.
Heat. They've got heat. They've got tea. I'm happy.
Yeah. We
I'm a simple man.
We came in on Saturday to see the new place and have a chat, and I had to warn them about your team.
Well, I haven't gone full teen on with them yet. I'm not sure they're fully aware of all that. I haven't come in with me box of Barry's yet.
No, are you easing yourself in?
Matt at a time. I'm doing the box of Barry's thing already in my new job.
Oh yeah,
I'm taking it in tomorrow.
In day one. Well, don't keep that for behind.
Keep that for the Patreon.
Yeah. We keep. I love the way we keep teasing people with really shit topics for the Patreon.
Here, Robbo, talk about tea bags on our Patreon.
Yeah.
I'll go straight over.
We never got round to the snow chat the other week either, so that might be on there soon as well. So let's get stuck into the football transfer stuff. The idea of this was because I love watching Gary Neville and Carragher and all the others on that show talking about stuff, and they were talking about this, and I just thought for me it's an interesting chat about the wider idea of transfers, and especially it was a lot of it was sort of in the context of United and Ten Hag and how badly they've gone wrong, and it's actually quite nice for us, isn't it? Smugly to be at the complete opposite end of that conversation now, which we weren't for a very long time, and it is. I think it's actually amazing just how similar to our cycle theirs is.
Yeah.
After our period of domination. And all that shit about, it'll never happen to us. And it's almost happened fucking step for step, the way it happened to us. Overspending on players, buying shit players that don't fit what you want to do, no structure. Wages too high, all the rest of it. But we'll come on to them. We'll have a little chat about them. But the wider thing is more who should be signing players for a football club? Because that was the debate they had on that podcast. And I thought that's an interesting chat, because traditionally, and when we were growing up, there wouldn't be a question about that, would there? The managers decided which players to sign, but we're in a completely different era now.
Well, we are.
So I was going to ask you, what do you think?
You think about there's the Shankly story, and he was supposedly sounded out by Liverpool before he came to Liverpool, and one of the reasons he didn't come was that the directors were signing the players, and he wanted more say. So it perhaps goes back further than we think. I think what's happened in modern football more, it's it's dressed up in titles, and we've got used to the idea of director of football and all that kind of stuff, haven't we? And that's become more of a thing. But I remember even a long time back, when there was all the fallout of Hicks and Gillette and that era at Liverpool, and Hodgson and Joe Cole and all that kind of stuff. I remember hearing a few bits and bobs and tweeting about it, writing about it, whatever, putting it in my magazine at the time, well read and things like that. And national journalists, let's just say that, because I never like to sort of throw people under the bus just in case, contacted me and just said it still does happen that you know, the directors will sign players. He said he was because I was saying I'd heard that the Cole thing was just sort of done by like Perslow et al. And that Hodgson just had to cop for it, like, you know, and it wasn't like there was no sort of like obvious football man involved in the signing of Joe Cole on the daft wages, etc., etc. And, you know, obviously me as a football fan, I look at it and go, well, maybe if there was, you might not have bothered. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, he contacted me saying, no, it still goes on, that the fellas, you know, we've got the money, who hold the purse strings, if you like, will still go off and go, no, that's a good deal, that I'm getting him. No, that's a good deal, I'm getting him. And you see like, you know, clubs flip-flop from models all the time, don't they? And they'll get one in and then they'll go back to a manager who just does everything. Then you sort of hear stuff about like the owners were more hands-on there, but then they backed off. And, you know, because even like West Ham, like, you know, West Ham seems to have gone at it lots of different ways with different styles of managers and buying big players, and then the players not turning out, and then going back old school to Moyes. And Moyes seems frustrated sometimes, and given who's on the West Ham board, I imagine they sign players. I imagine they don't listen to everything David Moyes says. So I think there's probably loads of it goes on. And one thing that I do think is interesting about football generally, and I've actually asked some people in football this question on numerous occasions, on and off the record, and they basically, like, my question is always, is what we see or is what we know as just like your layman football fan even close to what goes on? Do you know what I mean? And the answer is mostly no. Like, and there's almost like a bit of a code that they all don't talk about some of the things that go. Like there was an ex-player that told me loads of stuff about mad stuff, that managers that are revered and seen as intelligent and all that, saying really mad things to dressing rooms full of players, like things like, you know, like someone had a kid in the dressing room, like not a kid in the dressing room, someone in the dressing room, their wife had just had a kid.
Okay.
And he was like sort of like basically saying he was against that, and that he wanted players who didn't have young kids taking the focus off the game and things like that. And when I heard
he was against his players having children.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so like he wanted players that weren't wrapped up in family duties. Like, I was just like,
that's wild, that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's mad. But football sort of, you know, I feel anyway, it does just sort of make its own rules, doesn't it? And this is why, like, I still get wrapped up into it, and we're all sort of like hypocrites, and we're all weird about football, and that's just part of it. I've accepted that now. And there's 101 things I've said or done about footy that people could probably pull up, and what about when you said this and when you said that. But loads of it just is bollocks away from the actual playing of the football. Even like, you know, the stuff that comes out in the press sometimes, or, you know, quite clearly when a journalist like being briefed to fuck and then just regurgitates it. And I'm looking at it going, really? Like, you know, like even all this United stuff at the minute, as though like, that's it now, it's sorted. And like, I'd had a bevy and I saw some tweets over the weekend, and I was like, and it was Henry Winter. And like, it was just making me cringe and itch a bit. And I was like, the Glazers are still there, mate. And then I got all these mancs replying to me saying, oh, show you don't understand. And I said, no, it's like, I do understand. It's being PR'd to within an inch of its life that everything's all right now, because the other fella's come in and took a minor shareholding and is appointing a few people around football. And the focus is now going to be on, the fucking Glazers are still there, though. And me personally, if I was a Man United fan, I wouldn't rest until they were gone, given everything they've done so far.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh no, you know, what's he called? Is it Radcliffe or Radcliffe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Him and his boys and the lad they've poached from City and all that. It's just like black, you know, that's it, like a source at that. And it's like, but I've seen in football 1,000,001 times at my own club, at many other clubs, that this will sort it, and it doesn't. You know what I mean? Like, it's just PR, isn't it? It's PR for the fans. You know what I mean?
And their ones even, I mean, I don't want to turn this into a show just about Man United, but they're an interesting basket case, aren't they? Because that deal is particularly, do you know what you just said about like how close is what we think is going on to what's going on behind the scenes? Well, even from like do you know, if I think about that from a corporate transaction deal perspective, if I was a lawyer working on that deal, how complex that deal must be to be able to try to divvy up such a fucking monster company
and say you're
in charge of this and we're in charge of this, and then it's like, okay, where are the lines and who gets it? Like the Glazers have pulled off, to me, from my perspective, like they've pulled off the deal of the century, because they get to go with the footy side now, which is the bit that it's the front facing bit that you get criticised for. They get to go, that's not us.
Yeah, they just sit in the background now and wait for that right offer to come.
Yeah,
whenever
well,
the cash cow can be milked.
And if Ratcliffe's successful and makes the football side good, it raises the value of the entire thing, which they're still a majority shareholders of. But then things like, you know, we've joked around in the past few weeks about the ground is literally fucking crumbling.
Yeah.
And I mean, you don't know, it's rumours, but it seems like the press has been briefed to the fucking max extent on this to try and get the positive PR out. The numbers that were coming out of the cash that's going in on top of the deal was like 250 million. And that's like, that can sound like a lot of money to us normal folk. But when it comes to football clubs, you're like, well, okay, are they responsible for redeveloping Old Trafford or building a new stadium? Because there's £1 billion right there, isn't it? If you're looking at like what Spurs have done and what Madrid and Barcelona are doing and all that, we've come at that from a different angle. And it's funny, all of this coming back around. And it'll be interesting to see whether we get any of the old like cranks coming out saying we're in John Henry's pocket, like giving them compliments. But even as I think about this, going back to what you were saying before about, and bringing it back around to the signing players, when you think about it, having a hedge fund in charge of your club takes away loads of risk of like egocentric rich owners meddling too much in the football side. Because
dreaming up that they could, you know, create a new competition and migrate everyone to it.
Look, that's the downside of people being in it just for money. But if you think about, you know, that the story, the historic story of the owners just bought someone, that comes from like the weakness we'd all have. And we can say we wouldn't do it as much as we want. But let's say you and I suddenly became billionaires. Let's say like TLC makes us billionaires and we bought LFC. It would be fucking hard for us not to be someone going, you can buy Mbappe there, you know, lads. And we're on a fucking yacht somewhere in Monaco and we meet Kylian Mbappe and he goes, I'd sign for you. And we're like, well, we've got all the fucking money. We want to see Mbappe play for Liverpool, so let's just fucking buy him. And then you say to the manager who you appointed and you pay his salary, you're fucking playing Mbappe now because it's my fucking footy club. Of course that happens, but that happens because of the ego of the people who are rich enough to buy footy clubs. Whereas if you've got a hedge fund running it, it is more likely to be like, well, no, none of us know anything about footy, so why would I buy someone?
I mean, there's all kinds of madness, isn't there, even at our own club once you start talking about it. Like, you know, Brendan Rodgers briefed that, you know, the players that were playing for Liverpool weren't his choice, and then it became really obvious some of them weren't as well, didn't it? You know, like, obviously he didn't use Firmino well and ended up basically playing him as a right back at Old Trafford, which is a bit wild to say the least. So, you know, and like, you know, I know for a fact as well that sort of, not only there was the public briefings, but there was off the record briefings where it was like, he's not my player, I didn't go for him and all that, and just sowing the seed that some of it wasn't down to him. I think he went too far with it, like, personally, you know what I mean, and ended up being like, it just sounded like a, you know,
the briefings.
And it just sounded like a load of excuses in the end, didn't it? You know what I mean? And it was like, and that's where, you know, Klopp, I'm sure, and he does hint at it at times, doesn't he? I'm sure he's being frustrated with not being able to buy certain players at certain times and what have you. Equally, I don't think he's had anyone forced on him, but you do get the impression with some of the stories that, you know, the old transfer committee, as it was always referenced, had to put his arm up his back a little bit and say, no, we need to pay that for Alisson, or no, we need to pay that for Van Dijk, or whatever it might have been. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting, and that's why we're interested in it, and that's why we're talking about it, isn't it? And that's why there's 1,000,001 books, podcasts, videos, you know, the column inches and whatever else, because we're all intrigued as to what does go on and how it does work. And, you know, loads of, like, even like the, you know, bringing it back to Man United again, but just because I've heard a lot of this lately, you know, like, oh yeah, he's speaking to the fans and all this. And I was washing the dishes while I heard that, and I think I said out loud to myself, yeah, taking another box there, because he speaks to the fans and shows that he's open and that he's listening, and they all go away and go, that's great, he's open and he's listening, and then they'll cherry pick what got said in that conversation to something tangible that they can prove. Oh, we did this and that proved, we fixed that hole in the roof because the fans are on about it. We listened, sound. There'll be loads of stuff that will be like, well, we don't want to do that, so chip that. Or we do want to do this, and we're just going to do it anyway because we own the club, or we're a major stakeholder in the club. We've put dough in, and yeah, fans are great, but we'll just crack on. That happens all the time. Do you know what I mean? And like, I think it's, you know, it's good and it's right that fans have fought their way into sort of having a bit of a golden ticket, well, not golden ticket, but a ticket on boards and a say and supporters boards and forums and all those kinds of things that are happening more and more, and that are sort of enshrined now with the Premier League, and we've got the white paper, and it's all ahead of the independent regulator, isn't it? It's them scrambling around to say, no, actually we can regulate ourselves. I think the point deduction things and all that are a similar reason.
Well, no coincidence, it's all fucking active all of a sudden, is it? Like exactly. All of a sudden FFP's got teeth, hasn't it?
It's funny that, isn't it?
Like, oh, that's interesting timing. Is that just coincidental?
Yeah, no, it's not, because they absolutely do not want that. Do you know what I mean? And so, you know, now it's like, oh, we've got our act in order now. Look, we knocked 10 points off Everton. We're going to take some money. We're going to take some points off Forest. We might take more off Everton. Whatever you want.
We could do a whole show about that, by the way. Do you know when that news came out last week? I was like, can we do another show?
Yeah,
if you haven't seen it, go back. Imagine being Everton Part 2.
Yeah.
Sure, that could only be Everton, couldn't it? You know, we've already done you once with a record points deduction. We're coming after you again.
Well, it's a 3-year rolling cycle as well. So there's actually a scenario where
it just keeps happening.
It could get done now and get done again next season.
Yeah.
And like, I imagine, and you know, if you are an Evertonian, like, or some of them will be, it does feel like they're out to get you, doesn't it?
Just a piss take, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And like, to be fair, like, you know, I've, you know, tipped my toe in it like you do with stuff that's outside your own club. And, you know, I see some of them like in the really hammering down on the corrupt thing and all that. But I've seen plenty and heard plenty actually where they've been saying like, we get that it's mismanagement of our own club. Of course we do. But why us? Why now? And all. And like, they seem fairly fair questions, don't they? And I get the counter argument also where everyone says, and they literally voted for those rules. Do you know what I mean? Because they did. The Premier League is the teams in the Premier League.
You've made this point repeatedly, haven't you? And I think loads of people just don't get that. And I think in my head, I've never really stopped to think about this properly, that the Premier League isn't like some separate independent body. Yeah. It's just 20 footy clubs voting on stuff, isn't it?
And when 14 say, yeah, it happens.
Yeah. And that's just the way it is. I mean, there was that thing. Did you see there was a thing slightly off topic, but it's connected? That Richard Masters, to try and placate people, said a date has been set for City's charges to be heard. Yeah. But then, and it's things like this that I just don't get. Do you know, whenever you see a clip of like one of these select committees that they love putting clips of on the news now, one day I'm going to sit down and watch an entire select committee thing just for like comedy purposes, because whenever I see clips of them, I'm like, sorry, these are just fucking clown houses, aren't they? When do they ever get anywhere or do anything? He said, and even this, you think, you're the chief of this and you don't realise just saying this out loud is going to cause trouble. We've set a date for the hearing, for hearing the charges, but we're not going to tell you what it is. And you're like, okay, mate.
Cheers, lads.
What the fuck does that mean? And I tell you, all it does is make us all go, well, no one's going to like what date it is then, are they?
Did you see the freedom of information request as well?
Yeah.
Where
it's not in the public interest for you to hear what was in there. I mean, what does that fucking tell you?
Yeah, like how do you think everyone's going to react when you say this secret thing that happened? We're going to keep it a secret, but we acknowledge it happened, but it's a secret. Yeah. So you can't know because you're a pleb. You're just a football fan. Don't give a shit if you've supported them all your life. Don't give a shit if you want something fair. Don't give a shit if you don't like it all and you're on the verge of walking away. It's our secret, and you're not qualified enough to know.
But also, like,
oh, okay then. Well, we'll just all walk away and accept that.
Thanks. Yeah,
nothing to see here.
Yeah. We should just get those t-shirts printed because it does. Someone sent it to us on Twitter, didn't he? But it's that, isn't it? Like you're like, sorry fellas, do you even realise what that's saying to us? It's this secret conversation between us and City would be damaging. Like, it's not in the public interest for us to fucking release it.
Well,
that's not going to make us go with something good then, is it?
And like I've said loads of times, and a million other people have said, if you don't tell us something, then we'll fill the void with conjecture.
But they know that too. Yeah. They're not stupid. Yeah. So, and we've touched on this in the past. The problem I always have with that is, like, they know that by doing that, we're going to fill the void. So how bad is the fucking truth? That they're comfortable, that this is a better position for them to be in.
So should we guess? Because, you know, what's going to happen? Like, so if Abu Dhabi or representatives have said, we won't do deals with the country if you like, you know, put any weight behind this. Did they say that? Don't know. But it just seems like they're incredibly close to each other, too close. Why are governments even involved? Like, you know what I mean?
When it's not state-owned. It's just, but it's all back to that, isn't it?
It makes your head hurt, doesn't it? It's like, genuinely, like, it's like, how have we got to this place where we talk about all this stuff? And it's like, I'll tell you why we still talk about it. It's because we still love the game, we still care, and it still matters. But equally, though, it's like so frustrating, isn't it? It's just like, so I went to, I don't know if I've talked about it on here before, but like I went to Marine again the other week, and it was really good, and I had a good time, and I seen people I knew there, and, you know, happy days. And they played away the weekend just gone, and they won 7-1. And like, they've got like a real chance of the playoffs, and et cetera, et cetera. And obviously I'm only living around the corner now, so I'm like keeping an eye on the fixtures and seeing when I can next get to one. But there's loads of people now, it seems to me, who are going, oh, it's better though, innit? And like, you're like, you know, lads I took who hadn't been before and stuff like that, and they were like, oh, I was surprised by the standard of football, to be honest with you, and all this. And I was like, yeah, they're not mugs, like, do you know what I mean? And yeah, you know, other people have argued with me about this, but like that game I went to the other week, there was like 1,200 there again, and it was like, that's good, that, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? I mean, you mentioned the other week, didn't you, when we were talking about Henderson? It's more than some of the Saudi games are getting.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's essentially what? There's Division 7, yeah. I think, Step 7 of English football. So I think people will always love football, or always love an aspect of football, or always love, you know, football when they were a kid or what have you. But all these blurts and this general chat and just the way it's gone and all that, it does test your love of it, doesn't it?
Well, I wonder whether in our lifetime it'll eat itself. Do you know, at that level? Because we've touched on this before, but if you went back to like our granddads, or especially our great granddad's generation, the footy they watched and what it was like. Do you know, like the stories of like the players be on the bus with the fans going to the game? And imagine if you stopped and said to like our great granddads, so in 80 years time, whatever that time frame is, we're going to go from this to footballers are paid millions of pounds every year to play football. We're going to be in these massive stadiums. There's going to be all this shit going on, like state ownership. The government are going to be getting involved, and they won't tell us what talks they're having. Those people would have said to us, what the fuck are you talking about? Yeah, it's just a game. That we just do this for a laugh, to have a break from work. Like, that's what this is. So when it turns like this, I think you'll see more and more people migrating to the marine type footy.
They will say that when they do say their counter argument is that the stadiums are full though, and like there's a huge black market for tickets, and well, certainly at the big clubs anyway. And you know, we know that at Liverpool, it's especially with Liverpool doing well at the moment as well. It just makes it impossible. There's a huge demand for tickets, and look, you know, there always was to an extent, but you know, again, something I've said a million times. But like when I first started going, I went to a League Cup game midweek, 17,000 there, and like in the soonest era, there was like plenty of games where it was like 30,000, 35,000. And before Blue Nose, and I know some Blue Noses do watch, and some people are weird, aren't they? take a look at your own attendances before you start getting stuck into me about that. Because there's sunk loads. There was a really low one under Kendall. But now it feels like there's that many people interested and that many people prepared to travel, and it's globalized, hasn't it? Which was a strategy, as we talked about before. From their perspective, they're like, nah, like we're doing it right and it's sound, and we can't keep pinching and some people might drop off the edge because it becomes too expensive or they've had enough, but there's all these people coming through who still want to go. And yeah, when you say it could eat itself, I do wonder that myself, but then I wonder how. I mean, how it might eat itself is that it might change and you might lose what was once termed, what was it, legacy fans during that Super League bollocks. So me and you would be legacy fans, yeah. And look, you see people say it all the time, don't you? I mean, I've never heard or seen a document where someone's actually said that who's related to a club, but a lot of supporters surmise that some of the big clubs actually don't want the likes of me. Do you know what I mean? So, what do I do? Well, I've got a season ticket. I go to every home game. I go to aways if I can get my hand on a ticket. Do I go to the club shop and spend a fortune before every game? No. Do I spend a load of money on drink and food in the ground? Not really. I might get the odd drink. I might get a pie if I'm stuck. But I also know better food and drink is available at better prices from elsewhere. So I'll go to home baked, or I'll go to a pub I like, and I'll get in the ground and I'm already refreshed. So, would it be better if my seat wasn't me and my seat was on rotation of someone coming from afar, experiencing Anfield for the first time, or for the third or fourth time, whatever it might be, being made up, spending a load of money. And I always think, I find that sad. Like I used to talk to, when I worked in Manchester for a long time, used to talk to a long-term Man United fan, and he was absolutely sound. They do exist. And he'd gone forever since he was a kid. And he wasn't a blurt about the rivalry and all that. Like, it was there, and we give each other light-hearted stick, but nothing bad. And we were just talking about being like I guess we were talking about being legacy fans. And he said, United did this thing where if you'd been a season ticket holder for whatever it was, 20 years, 25 years, whatever, I don't know what the cut-off point was, they invited everyone to a dinner. And he said it was not too fancy. He said you got a couple of bevies and there was a bit of scran and just some people from the club saying sort of thank you for your support and all that. And I was like, do you know what? That's better than nothing. And one of the things that I've used it as an example in loads of things I've written. So one of my best mates who's been going forever, since he was 8, I think. So he's essentially been going for 40 years and he's had a hell of a season ticket for that time. And I've always said, if you gave your season ticket up, nothing had happened. And that's sad, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like, no one would go, why have you give it up? Or no one would say, oh, thanks for 40 years of support. Or just nothing. It's just like, oh, this is just another bum. At the likes of Liverpool, well, and I probably would have wrote Man United in, but they've done that because that fella told me. It does feel sometimes like, oh, well, we know we've got another bum on that seat, whether you go or not, until we don't really care. Do you know what I mean? And so to bring it all back to something you might have said ages ago, I'm going to take it with a pinch of salt when they're saying we're speaking to the fans. Yeah.
But look, I think you just raised a really interesting point, and this is off on a tangent from where we started this, but that's what we like to do. So,
yeah, as usual.
Yeah. We'll come back to the main transfer stuff. I think it's really interesting, the idea of, because I've said this for ages, like from a financial perspective, right? I was going to say from a business perspective, but that's wrong. From a financial, purely numbers on profit and loss sheets, having me and you in, because there's a limited number of seats, there's a finite number of seats in any stadium. So having me and you in one of those seats who won't go to the club shop, won't buy food and drink in the ground, usually, will come in at the last minute, we'll go to the pub down the road, we'll buy the chips and this chippy down the road, we'll buy one Liverpool top, or won't, not even that, we'll buy a little badge to put on our own tops. On a purely financial basis, for now, short term, we're less valuable than the tourist fan, wherever they're coming from, who will come in and spend all that money for one day. But as you were talking, it reminded me of a fella I was watching a few weeks ago on something. He was brilliant, like a marketing executive from like a very famous marketing company, and he was brilliant to listen to. And he was talking about all these different examples of stuff like that and how short-sighted it is. And he gave the example of a hotel chain, and he said, this is the problem with consultants who could just come in and people who are just trying to maximize profits now. He went, so take the example of a top hotel chain that has a concierge on the door, like old-fashioned guy in a top hat and a big long coat and all that. And when you walk into the hotel, he makes you feel really special. And because of that person or those people and that idea, you value that hotel more highly. So you'll pay more to stay there. And the whole experience of going there is better. But a consultant who's looking at the profit and loss, bottom line, will come in and say, we can save you a fortune by getting rid of the concierge and by just installing, because the concierge will hold the door open for you as you're coming through, we'll just install automatic doors with a sensor on, and they'll open and close by themselves. And that's better for the customer anyway. They don't have to interact with anyone, blah, blah, blah. And in the short term, that seems like a great idea because your profits go up. But in the long term, that hotel just becomes any other hotel. So guess what? People won't pay the prices to stay there anymore. And now you're just in the mix with everybody else. So the people who were coming to stay don't come anymore. So in the long term, it's really shit. It's a bad idea. And I think it sounds like a mad analogy, but I think that's almost spot on for football. Because when you think of, let's use Liverpool as an example, but it'll be the same for Old Trafford and for Newcastle, for clubs with big atmospheres and very famous legacy fans. Who are the tourists coming to see? I think they kid themselves that the tourists are coming just to see the game. They're not. They're coming for think about what encouraged people to buy the football club in the first place.
Yeah.
The cop, the fans.
Or Klopp to come to it.
Exactly. The whole idea of what we are. And it's the same with a lot of the other great clubs.
And again,
you get rid of that. And how long does that last? Because all of a sudden, people are going, oh, well, going to that game is not that big a deal anymore. It's not that big an experience. Players even. How many players do we sign that we shouldn't have been able to sign because of what we are as a fan base?
Yeah. And that's another conversation that I do wonder what gets said. And then what's the reality perception around it? Because, again, there's a perception that maybe some clubs, wish they didn't have season ticket holders for exactly the reason we're talking about here. And, the turnover of different sets of fans in the ground, filling it up every week rather than the same sets of fans. But, they're a bit goose there now, aren't they? Because, if you've, I put my name down in the 90s and got one in 2011. And if you're telling me you want me to now give that up, well, I'm not going to, am I? And I'm not going to vote for that. And I'm not going to advocate that. But equally, you'll get some, like my son, I want him to be a Red and he's got the bug, he wants to go. I buy him a ticket when I can get one, but that's very rare, to be honest with you. And I can't put him down on a waiting list for the season because it's closed. But even that, it's like, this is where there is no obligation for a club to tell you the truth at any point or tell any of its supporters the truth, is it? It's just a business. It's not law, is it? It's not, there's no you can't, it's not the government. You're not voting them in. So it's like, if they wanted to if they wanted to gradually phase out over a long period of time, season tickets, well, they couldn't they? And I know you'll have fans who will organise and call it out and say it's wrong or whatever. But even when fan groups are say demanding certain sets of information, well, what if the club just say no? And it's the same, all aspects of it. When managers are in press conferences and it's all taken as dead, it's all taken as read, everything they say. It's like, well, they're telling you what they want to tell you, aren't they? Mm-hmm. And the stuff that they don't want you to know until they don't say it. Simple as that. There are players we all, Jurgen Klopp, we all love him. He's done a great job. We're challenging for the title again right now. Are you telling me he's never pissed anyone off and he's got absolutely everything right and the whole time he's been here? I doubt it. And some of the players that have left, not really, we didn't really know why, did we? It was kept within, and no journalist got hold of it really about why. Like even like Carvalho. I mean, I think we can probably guess. Do you know what I mean? But we don't know. So yeah.
But that's interesting actually, and it does bring us back around to like the transfer stuff and the question about that, because we were just touching on it before we started recording, and we did our thing of checking ourselves, said we'll do that on the show. But when you think about it, like, it's funny, isn't it? I've never really thought of this. Nothing really ever comes out bad about Klopp from behind the scenes, but there's no way he's never pissed off a player.
That's what I'm saying,
So how much is it that, like, let's say Carvalho, right? Let's say he's not a big fan of Klopp. How much harder is it to criticise Klopp and risk that going up against his reputation in the game than it is to criticise Brendan Rodgers, which lots of people did? And we heard loads of stories, didn't we, about players saying, he says one thing to your face and another thing behind your back and blah, blah, blah. And I think that ties in a bit to the whole idea of the transfer committee, because for Liverpool fans, and even maybe even for non-Liverpool fans who listen, you might remember this. Like, when we had the transfer committee under Rodgers, it's all we ever fucking talked about, wasn't it? Like, you heard the phrase transfer committee constantly.
Yeah.
Now we've still got a transfer committee now, but no one ever talks about it. No one ever says the phrase transfer committee anymore, do
Well,
they?
Edwards has gone, hasn't he, and all that. And then I think it's like, but this is back to what I've just said before. I don't know. I don't know what the structure is behind the scenes. And like, I read the stuff that comes out and listen to stuff and what have you. But Liverpool don't need to disclose to anyone exactly how it works, do they? And like, we know FSG are involved and all that. We know Edwards has gone. We know Julian Ward's gone. And then, there's stuff you see. I mean, you just see stuff on social media and you're like, well, how informed are you to say X or Y? And then you just sort of say, well, you believe someone because you think he might know someone or whatever. But it's just, there's that much of it now as well, isn't there? Like, sometimes I just sort of like buzz off it a bit, really. And I just think that it doesn't really matter. Do you know what I mean? Like, I want Liverpool to be successful. And I don't think I know more about running a football club than the people who are running it.
How do you think it should be done, though? Like, if you had to say, do you think the way Liverpool, I mean, because we get a lot of plaudits now, and we're going to go on to have a little chat before we finish, if we should still have time, about like some signings, favourite and best and worst signings and all that. But as I was prepping for this, it's fucking ridiculous. When you've lived through the as adults, like our childhood years watching Liverpool, the great sides. I don't remember much of that. But mainly my adult years, in relative to other Liverpool eras, was shite. And we bought loads of shite players repeatedly. There was just a long list of them, and some of them I've thrown in to talk about later. But when you look at the Klopp era, it's frightening how good we've been at buying players. So I think that's obviously, and it can be confirmation bias, that makes you go, well, that's the best structure to have. You're better off doing that. But then equally, there've been managers who are good at picking players and good at. It was interesting that on that podcast, the Stick to Football, when I watched it the week, someone mentioned, I think it was Keane, mentioned that Gordon Strachan got to a point in his managerial career where he said, I'm not going to pick players anymore because I'm shit at it. And I thought, that's dead interesting, isn't it? That a manager's had the foresight to go, fucking hell, I think I'm good at picking players, but then they never go well. So you pick the players and I'll just coach them. But do you think, generally speaking, or do you think there's no black and white answer? Like, should managers, and I guess there's a structure question to it as well, like, because does it matter? Does it matter on the structure? Does it matter on the club? Does it matter on the circumstances? Does it matter? Does it depend on the manager themselves and their standing? Where should the power be? Should someone have a veto? Should a manager have to manage a player? Because Firmino's a great example of this, isn't it? If it had been up to Rodgers, he might have vetoed signing Firmino. And when he got him given to him, he didn't know what to do with him. If it was up to Rodgers, we'd have probably got rid of him. And then Klopp comes along.
Rodgers wanted and got Benteke, didn't he?
Exactly.
So the story goes.
Yeah. And so you think, but is that because Rodgers wasn't a good enough manager? He wasn't, his status wasn't good enough to...
based on how good Firmino was, you'd have to say, yeah. I mean... there probably isn't a black and white answer. Is there for me? Like the answer is get as much information as possible about any potential sign. And so when we really learned about Moneyball and we learned about stats coming into it more, and we learned about Liverpool, like, getting dossiers on players and doing all this due diligence. It was a great story, wasn't it? And as you say, the hit rate's pretty good under Klopp. Like, it's not too many duds among his signings. But then it was interesting literally the other day in an interview, he said, "But you still don't know until you get them in what they're going to be like." And I was thinking, but we all used to say, "Oh, it's amazing! Like they find absolutely everything out." But so there's a level of gamble with any transfer. I think you can do as much due diligence as you want, and there's still a chance they fail. And it cannot even be down to the player. It can be like, the wife, the kids, they don't like the area, whatever. There's a million and one reasons to it all. So I guess my answer would just be that they're as informed as possible, and that, and that would be what you would always come back to. So if the manager particularly wanted a player, someone should be able to say to him, and in the Liverpool structure, it looks like you have got that. Mike Gordon, as an example. Say, okay, well, on what basis stuff? Do you know what I mean? Tell me why. You can't just say, I fancy him, he's good.
Yeah. Well, use Ten Hag as the example. I want Anthony because I managed him at Ajax and he was good. And United's gone, all right, we'll just go and get him then. And it's like, how much are you going to pay for him? Why are we paying
this? Yeah.
Like, is he worth that much money? Because I don't care how. And I think that's the bit, isn't it? The checks and balances.
Yeah. And it feels like, and again, we could just be, we're sold a story, like we've already sort of said in this podcast, but it feels like, we're still pretty good at it, because, loads of people panicked, didn't they? And we're like, oh, Edwards goes, it's all going to fall apart.
Well, and then Julian Ward, as you said before, wasn't just Edwards, and then there was all the rumours, weren't there, that Klopp's getting more power.
Yeah,
he's pissing people off, that's why they're all leaving.
Yeah, and there was lots of conjecture about Lindes as well. But now everything's all right because we're in a title race.
Yeah. But it is funny that is the funny thing, isn't it? Like, I do wonder a lot about that, like, in life generally, how much is just confirmation bias and how much is just luck. Like, something lucky happened. I think there's about people who are billionaires. I've heard people say this, like, elsewhere. Like, it's just that you're just seeing a selective sample size. You're not seeing, like, Musk, one of my favourite billionaires, people love hearing me say, his story, if you look at his story, there's a couple of moments along the way where he could have just been wiped out completely. And there's a huge element of luck involved. I don't care what anyone says. I used to never believe in luck, but then I've run a few things in the past and dealt with multimillionaires who are 20, 25, 30 years older than me, and they've gone to me, just unlucky that. And I've gone, what? And wouldn't have it. And they were like, Paul, you'll realise over time, there's just a massive element of luck in loads of stuff. Timing, just something happening at the right time, had nothing to do with you. And I've seen that since as well. Like, good luck things happening where I'm like, that had nothing to do with me. And it went well. But I've got, I had the self-awareness to go, that wasn't me. Whereas if you let your ego take over, it's like, oh, I was fucking great. That was all because of me. And I do wonder how much is like, you get a few good things happening at a good stage in your career. And then people are like, oh, you're fucking brilliant, you, or whatever. But then, who was it? It was remember the Newcastle? Who was the Newcastle guy? And he had a spell of just identifying boss players. I'm going to say something now that could make me look really stupid. It was Thingy's, the comedian, Alan Carr. It was his like uncle or something.
Oh, and they gave him like a 7
And they gave him like an 8-year contract on big bucks. I haven't heard of him since. And I remember saying at the time, he could have just had a dead lucky run of picking players. Because all the things you've just said, let's say you're a scout traditionally the way it used to be, you're picking players. You don't know. Like, think of all the varying factors that could make them a success or not, that you've got no control over. But every one of them that does well, you get the credit for. And people just forget the ones you didn't.
We had Kamoli, didn't we? And like, his reputation has gone up and down over the years on exactly what you're saying, on the buys that worked and the buys that didn't. And then even that, like we always say, I'm not the only one to say it, the Stuart Downham one, and you're always like, well, in that first game at Anfield, if that shot hadn't hit the bar and had gone in,
100%,
do we then escape onto a different timeline where actually like he might have succeeded?
Yeah, there's a parallel universe somewhere where Stuart Downham's like Ryan Giggs for Liverpool. Because I've often said that about it. It was funny, we did our producer's show with
Graham
the top. Graham Carr, yeah, with our top tier subscribers last week, and someone mentioned, and there's a couple of things we might do shows out of, but someone mentioned about like why do we love some players and not love others when. And they used Michael Owen and Lucas Leiva as comparisons, didn't they? And like when you look at the footballing ability, Lucas Leiva's loved as a legend. Michael Owen, no one gives a shit about. No comparison as footballers. But I've always said the same thing about Lucas from a footballing perspective. There was a derby, I think it was his first season, and it was the one where Rafa subbed Gerrard. They went down to 10 men at Goodison, and Gerrard was just too typical Rafa substitution. Everyone thought he was mental, but he was basically saying they were down to 10 men and we needed to be more controlled. So we brought on Lucas Leiva, who would do exactly what he wanted him to do. And Lucas put one in the top corner would have been to win the game, I think. And Phil Neville handballed it on the line.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And Kaut takes the penalty and Lucas doesn't get the glory. But imagine if that had been Lucas's first season, he scores the winner in the derby, top corner. Does that then turn him into a superstar centre midfielder that we thought we were buying instead of someone who...
Well, again, that's like another sort of deeper observation about footy, isn't it? That for all that you plan and for all that you prepare and for all that you do your due diligence and all the rest of it, there is an element of randomness and luck, like, just the way the ball bounces and, conditions and injuries and, there is a level of stuff in football and that's what sort of retains the interest that you can't control, isn't it? So, like, in theory, City should be even more dominant than they have been, shouldn't they? Because, they've got the resources and, they've bent the rules and all the rest of it. And yet, Liverpool have managed to get in the way and have come close on a couple of other occasions, etc., etc. So, yeah, I think that's what retains the interest a bit, doesn't it? And yeah, it's
but that's why we love it fundamentally, isn't it? Yeah. Like, and even the likes
of loads of sliding
Guardiola's talked about stuff like that, isn't he? Like, he can coach a team to get so far, but once he gets to a certain point, he's literally like watching him with De Bruyne back and what De Bruyne did coming off the bench against Newcastle, and he was just like, yeah, that's not me. That's just because I've got a fucking unbelievable football. And the number of times he's said, and people sort of think he's being like faux humble, but I think he's just being genuine when he was like, well, why was your fucking Barcelona team so good? And he just goes, Messi's brilliant. Like, I genuinely think Guardiola's there going, yeah, like, I know I'm a good coach, but Joe, you give me a team without Lionel Messi, I'm not going to make it the best in the world. You give me this Man City team without Kevin De Bruyne, it's not as good. Because I'm like, I can say to Kev, go and stand there, mate, and do this and pass there. But I can't fucking make him play that pass and score that goal with a side-footed shot from the edge of the box. That's just individual genius. And I know there's loads of mitigating factors around this, because if it was all just luck and randomness,
no, it's not all
Klopp and Guardiola wouldn't rise to the top. That's your Allardyce shit, isn't it? Joe, you give me Sergio Aguero and I'll be better. And you're like, yeah, you would, mate, but you only get to have Sergio Aguero by working your way through the ranks and becoming boss. Like, that's... We're seeing it now, aren't we? And I think we will see Xabi Alonso as our manager one day. But it's the same thing. He's worked his way through, and he's going to get to a place where Madrid, Bayern Munich, and Liverpool do want him as manager because of what he's done elsewhere. We haven't got long left as usual, and there was loads of other stuff we could have got into. But so we'll wrap up just because we were talking about transfers rather than talk about this window, because there's not much going on, and I don't think there's much interesting to talk about. But it was funny just going back through like down the history books and just looking at some old signings and thinking the ones that went well and the ones that went wrong, and thinking like the ones that jumped out at me. And I've put a list here, but tell me if you thought of any others. But just off that list I've put in, like Morientes. I know he was older when he came to us, but we bought Morientes for £6 million from Real Madrid. And I remember at the time we were all so fucking excited about him. Yeah. Because you just think that's a nailed on success story, don't you? And it just didn't happen.
No, didn't happen. I mean, even like, Littman was another one, wasn't it? Where you're getting him at the wrong stage of his career. Like, he still did bits, like, but it wasn't sort of, the superhero that you're grown up wishing to see in a Liverpool shirt. And I think Morientes falls into the same category. Like, there was bits, but because I can remember like where I was working when he played for us, and like there was a girl in the office who was a red and like thought he was great, And I was just like, I'm not having it. Like, I'm not having it. I'm not seeing it when I'm going the game, you know what I mean? It's just, I don't think it's going to properly happen, and it's not going to properly set light, and it never did. How old do you reckon he is now?
Morientes?
Yeah.
In 2005. God, he must be, I'm going to say 52.
47.
I've gone a bit
Same
older
age as me.
40, same age as you. That's
wild.
mad, isn't it? What's he up to now?
I don't know. I was just pulling up how we got on at Liverpool. So 61 appearances, 12 goals, 8 assists. Yeah, given the pedigree, that wasn't quite what we were expecting.
Well, do you know what's hilarious about that? And this is one for our LFC show coming out before people see this, but it's hilarious, that, isn't it? Like, so Darwin Núñez, who's been getting slated all season by everyone except Liverpool fans, or most Liverpool fans, has got 10 goals and 10 assists this season, in a season where people are saying he's shit.
Oh no, but he's all right now because he scored.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I look, there was all kinds. I got that list from an article that someone said, the 10 worst Liverpool signings, and the list included people who I'd forgotten about, like Alberto Aquilani. I remember when we signed him. Benteke, Balotelli, and it's funny.
No Sean Dundee, no.
No, well, I put him on my list. Like, do you know when you think old school classics? But it's funny that Loris Karius makes the worst list, but he was only £5 million. And do you know when you look back at that and think, got a bit of sympathy there for him. We've bought a keeper for £5 million from Mainz, and he wasn't very good.
Of what he was involved in, though. Wasn't
I know, but don't you have a bit of sympathy with that? That, like, well, he was never that good, was he? We bought him for £5 million, and he didn't. He never. It's not like an Andy Robertson that we bought for £8 million, and then we watched him just get better and better and better. We bought a lad for £5 million from a middle of the road team, and that's all we ever saw, wasn't it? Like, he never left that level. But that's not his fault. That's our fault for thinking he should be better than he was. But going back to what we were saying before, one of very few failed signings. And I wanted to throw in, to finish on positives, like that. I was thinking about Joe surprises, like the best surprises we've had for signings. And this is going back to like
David Speedy.
David Speedy, fucking hell, showing your age there.
I'll throw him in there.
His goal at Old Trafford.
And he scored against the Blues.
That's a good shot.
It's funny because like I've heard some be like really, really negative about him and say like there's no way he should have signed for Liverpool, and he's just a mad Kenny shout type of thing. But me at that time, what he did, and even the sort of like he celebrated in front of the Evertonians in the Annie Road and said he didn't know where the cop was. Like, I loved that, do you know what I mean? It's absolutely quality.
Yeah.
And okay, I get it. I get why people were like, but to just have that little, and Ronnie Rosenthal, obviously, like I always mention him because
I like those. That's right. I like those little cult hero ones. I think they're some of the best things about footy sometimes, aren't they? The Igor Biscans and the.
Remember him? What was he called? Was it Paul Jones with the massive shorts who just like played in goal a couple of times randomly, but he was a red though, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So and it was like everyone just seemed to like really like the story, didn't he? They were like, "That's good, isn't it? Yeah. That he gets to go and like he's a red." And I know it was sort of competition. Right. Yeah, he was all right, and he just like played an handful of games or whatever it was. But it was just like I remember there just being like everyone was like, "Sound that?"
Yeah.
And there's loads of like absolutely random ones, isn't there? Like Kyriakos.
Fucking hell.
We ended up sort of like.
The Rafa era was full of them, wasn't it? Because he was like always buying players on a budget and
shopping in the middle,
trying to turn someone into a superstar. But I mean, one of the ones he did, he picked up was Philip Coutinho, £8.5 million, and that's what Rafa was constantly trying to do, wasn't it? But the few on my list were from that era. I think Alonso and Garcia were my favourites from that, because I remember when we signed them thinking, no idea who they are, like never heard of them. And then the two, I know they had different levels of impact, and Alonso was a level above Garcia. But Garcia's, when you think of Garcia's like highlight reel for us, and I know he was frustrating and all the rest of it, back flicks and back heels and all that.
Was he? What I was just thinking about Coutinho. Was he not? This is where my memory's like so poor, and like I'll get some random saying, "Call yourself a red," and you can't even remember when Coutinho signed. But Just being to work, mate, and come and do a podcast and never can't.
Well, we'll talk about that on the next show. Yeah. Well, maybe because I'm just seeing now. I've got it in my head. It was Benitez, but it was 2013.
Yeah, and it was him and Sturridge, wasn't it? Both got signed.
Yeah. Do you know why I think it was Benitez? Because Benitez had him at Inter.
Yeah, they were.
Benitez brought him into the team at Inter.
Because they were linking up at the end of the season, and then we were thinking, oh, we've got a chance here the following season. So it was Rodgers, wasn't it?
So it was Rodgers who brought him in. Yeah, Benitez is in my head because I madly, I don't know why I saw this. Obviously, I was keeping an eye on Benitez when he went to Inter, and he brought Coutinho into their team, and then we bought him. So I think in my head, I've given Benitez credit for us buying Coutinho, which is me, clutching at straws to give Benitez more credit. But look, one that's come up this week that we'll talk about on the Liverpool show about surprises and signings. And Carragher was doing this on Sky the other day. Jota. Yeah, and I think it's signings like that put United to shame, aren't they? Going back, like bringing it back around to the transfer committee thing and the structure. When we signed Jota, I remember Liverpool fans all saying like, "Oh, he's not even the best Wolves player."
I remember where I was when we heard it. Was still doing the rap then, and we were having a pint, like sort of like finished work, if you like, and then it like came through, and I just remember Neil, like it was me, Neil, and Rob, I think, having a pint, and he was like, "We're gonna have to go back and do a reaction show to say because we signed Jota." And so I'm on my phone like, well, I know he plays for Wolves, but
but who the fuck is he? Yeah. And that's it. When you imagine back then, if you'd have said to everyone, "This is what's going to happen with this sign," everyone would have gone, "Fuck off! What a bargain we've picked up there." And you've literally got Jamie Carragher on Sky now going, "He's the best finisher, better than Owen, on a par with Robbie Fowler." Like, and it's not ridiculous to say that.
His finishing is quality, like
unbelievable player. But that's it. That's all we've got time for. So if you want more of that shite, as I say, come over and join us on Patreon, and we'll have another show for you on Friday. That's it. If you do enjoy this, if you like us, if you want to support us, you don't have to put any money in. There's a free trial if you want to come and listen to the Patreon stuff and see whether you like it. But without that, subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave a review on a podcast app if that's where you're listening to it. Like this video if you're watching it on YouTube. Spread the word. Help us build this. It is growing. It's getting to where we want it to be. And we've got a lovely new studio to pay for now. So any support you can give, we are grateful for. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.